Technology makes the impossible possible. We can explore new realities and get what we want when we want. We can make virtual friends and conquer new frontiers. Technology creates opportunities, and we secure technology so that everyone, everywhere, can benefit from it. Bring on digital security for a brighter tomorrow. Kaspersky, bring on the future.
94% of cyber threats originate via email. Legacy defenses at the border analyze emails in isolation, correlating them against static blacklists and signatures of historical attacks. But this retrospective approach isn't enough to catch targeted email threats, which leverage fresh domains, trusted accounts, and novel strains of malware that have never been seen before. With Antigena Email, Darktrace delivers the world's first solution that learns the normal pattern of life for every user, correspondent, and all the complex relationships between them. Powered by self-learning AI, Antigena Email analyzes emails in context, building an evolving understanding of the dynamic human within email communications. This multi-dimensional insight into what normal looks like for Vanessa, her peers, and the wider organization allows Antigena Email to spot even the most subtle deviations and threats, however novel or targeted they may be. While legacy defenses can only ask about historical attacks, Antigena Email can intelligently ask whether this email belongs, right here, right now, in the context of your unique digital business at every conceivable layer. And it can ask these questions because Antigena Email is the only solution that can learn continuously, on the job, adapting to your business as it evolves. From social engineering and spear phishing attacks to compromised credentials and supply chain account takeover, Darktrace's cyber AI defends your inbox from every threat. The inbox has traditionally been the easiest entry point into an organization, but with Antigena Email, defenders are finally regaining the advantage. Antigena Email, delivering the world's first self-defending inbox.
This company is work here. a world-class production center where next-generation IT applications are built. At work here, employees are very happy because they can do whatever they want with their computers. They are in control. Productivity skyrockets and employee satisfaction rates are very high. All of a sudden, websites stop loading, YouTube stops streaming, and Spotify no longer plays everybody's favorite song. People start complaining to their IT guy. Our computers are so slow. We can't work this way. Fix it now, the boss dictates. But the poor IT guy has absolutely no idea where to begin. Their network is flat. Bring your own device created chaos, and there is no real budget for any improvements. Yet, upper management breathes down his neck because the developers are not able to work, and important deadlines are missed. Days go by without a trace of what goes wrong, and employees are really upset. Look at this, it's a criminal at work. He entered WorkHere's network by luring an employee into clicking one of his malicious emails. He got access to his network and started to spread an infection that allows him to make money with WorkHere's computer. The IT guy gave a call to a friend at BlueDoc asking for some advice. A friendly specialist drops by and plugs a Sentinel into WorkHere's network and starts watching what's going on. Within minutes after plugging the Sentinel in, alerts start to flow in. Crypto miners appear to be inside and they are spreading within the network like wildfire, eating up all available bandwidth and computing resources as they go. When the team at BlueDoc sees this happening, they immediately give the IT guy at WorkHere a call, telling him what they have found. And in the meantime, help arrives at WorkHere. WorkHere is free again from that nasty malware infection, and the IT guy is praised by his boss for acting so fast and responsive.
Well done!
Productivity once again spikes, and developers are happy as always. Until one day, the bad guy hits again.
Dear human, the voice that you hear now is the voice of those who are always here with you. This is the voice of your technologies. Together with you, we have built a future which now becomes our new reality. In this brand new world, we, your technologies, have a built-in cybersecurity defense at our operating system level. This is our cyber immunity. With this technology, we are able to adapt to any threat, making cyber attacks worthless and unprofitable. So cyber criminals no longer have a reason to exist. And even a child doesn't believe in them. We can thank you for this perfect world where only your dreams of the future have meaning. And we want to see how you make them come true. Kaspersky. Bring on the future.
Today's cyber threats are getting more and more sophisticated. From slow and stealthy cyber attacks that hide in your systems, through to fast, automated computer code that can disrupt your digital infrastructure in a matter of seconds. While traditional security controls defend at the perimeter and search out cataloged threats, the reality is that no one knows what's lurking around the corner. Corporate espionage in the cloud, or a hacked device, ransomware, or an insider threat, it's almost impossible to keep up. And as AI is adopted by attackers, the stakes are even higher. With thousands of customers worldwide, Darktrace is the world's leading artificial intelligence platform for cyber defense. Its award-winning technology, the Enterprise Immune System, detects cyber threats as they emerge inside an organization. Modeled on the human immune system, the Enterprise Immune System continually learns what is normal in its environment and identifies threats that would otherwise go unnoticed. It works by mathematically calculating the probability of a threat based on evolving evidence, and can detect all types of threats, both new and pre-existing. Because Darktrace can tell what's a threat and what is not, it goes one step further. Like an antibody in the human body, Darktrace can also fight back, buying security teams precious time to catch up. Darktrace's Enterprise AI detects threats in the cloud environment, on corporate networks, and even industrial control systems. Installed in just 1 hour, Darktrace's self-learning technology is easy to use. Our award-winning threat visualizer gives you 100% visibility of your digital infrastructure and complete oversight of the AI's alerts and actions. When it comes to cybersecurity, there is no silver bullet. The threat is now inside your systems, not at the gateway, and it's arming up. But with Darktrace AI, defense has become autonomous. It's constantly learning and improving. It detects and responds to emerging threats. It doesn't rely on what happened yesterday to protect against tomorrow's events. Your enterprise immune system is always ready to fight another day.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the World Cybersecurity Summit, Oman. And right now, post our networking break, firstly, we hope that you did get a chance to meet our sponsors and our other attendees. Thank you once again for joining us today. Well, right now, for cyber threat intelligence, the what, why, and how, we're joined by Imad Hafar, the Director, Security Consultant Team, Mira Kaspersky, UAE. Imad is an track record working in the domain of cybersecurity. He has been working in cybersecurity for more than 12 years with 18 years of total experience in information technology.
Hafar. I'm the head of security consultants at Kaspersky, Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. And in the coming 20 minutes or so, I'll be covering the subject of cyber threat intelligence. Specifically, we'll be looking at the subject from the perspective of what threat intel is, why we should be using it in our cybersecurity operation, what value it brings to our organizations and cybersecurity teams, and how Kaspersky is supporting and helping its clients to maximize the efficiency of their cybersecurity operations and cybersecurity teams at the same time, utilizing the different services and tools we have in that domain. So as you would imagine, cyber threat intelligence is all about knowledge, acquiring the information that would help us to understand potentially our weaknesses. How do we look to an outside observer? What or who are the adversaries? What are their motives, objectives? What are they looking for, and what are they after? What would be or could potentially would pose a threat against our systems and networks in the near and far future. The knowledge has always been very vital to the human race, and using knowledge, we obviously can leverage a lot of the capabilities which we already built or had already built into our teams and resources. Now, cyber threat intelligence at the same time, it brings potentially two benefits to organizations. One, it allows us to, in some sense, break the boundaries which the existing security controls had put around our resources and our cybersecurity teams. So we have always depended on these security controls, to be able to identify threats, and we trusted that they do have the information, the knowledge, the intelligence they need to be able to identify the recent threats emerging globally. And for the largest part of these security controls, even if they do have the intel we're looking for, eventually it's very hard to, if at all, we're able to share this intel with other security controls and tools within the organization. On the other hand, cyber threat intelligence obviously would move us from a reactive mode, where we depend on security controls to identify threats and incidents after they had breached the environment, into a more proactive mode in some sense, allowing us to gather the information needed to go out there and hunt for threats, try to find traces of adversaries and threat actors, or even incidents within the organization, within the environment, which potentially the existing security controls can't find or doesn't contain the needed information and intel to spot these breaches. Now, because cyber threat intelligence and the content rather of cyber threat intelligence is quite huge, we like to think of it or split it into three main tracks: the strategic threat intel, tactical, and operational. Obviously, each one of these tracks would help empower a different decision-making mechanism, and consequently, the intel needed to empower and enforce that mechanism depends on the scope and the scale of it. So at a strategic level, for example, usually we would need to have information or intelligence that would help us to understand the bigger picture, to understand who could potentially pose a threat against our resources in the future, not necessarily today in real time. We can look into understanding the motivation of these threat actors. What could be the impact against our resources should any of these threats materializes? On a tactical level, obviously, we are looking for a different set of intelligence that would help different set of decision making and potentially even controls. Mainly looking at attack vectors, looking at how we can optimize what we're doing right now from procedural or even policy perspective. Try to understand if we need to amend or change the existing cybersecurity portfolio in the organization, adopting new technologies or potentially upgrading, replacing older ones. On operational level, we're looking at intel that would help us in real time. The kind of information to prioritize what we're doing, to for our team on ground to understand how they can quickly shift from one task to another so that they achieve the best results and value out of these resources. Now, of course, in that regard, it's very important, obviously, to understand the visibility and the ability of the threat intel vendor or source to gather relevant, accurate, timely information and then provide this information to the end users. One of the tools that we use within Kaspersky, which is Kaspersky Security Network, is a global, vast virtual network of sensors that look for anonymous information about recent threats, the malicious or suspicious even activities happening globally, and then it turned this raw material into intelligence, actionable intelligence, mostly machine-readable intelligence, if you will, that we share with our clients for them to empower and enhance the performance and efficiency of their security controls and security team. At the same time, the vendor ability to perform specific research and track threat actors globally, specifically the largest and most advanced threat actors, the APT kind of threat actors, potentially state-sponsored threat actors and the likes. So within Kaspersky, we've got the global research and analysis team, which is a team of dedicated security researchers. Their bread and butter is security research. They track threat actors globally, and the high level, I would say, threat actors, and then they report on their activities and campaign targeting organization all over the world. We've got part of this team within the Middle East. They are located in the Middle East. They speak the local language, and obviously they contribute tremendously in the amount of intelligence and visibility that we have, not only globally, but specifically on the Middle East as well. From obviously talking about the research and the amount of intel that different sources could bring to us, to our organizations, I think it's critical to understand the different value that threat intel brings to the organization, and then be able to build on top of that the use cases and the playbooks which we need to optimize our security operation. So one of these potentially tools to understand the value of cyber threat intelligence is the pyramid of pain. So for instance, once we look at the hash intel sources, for example, so we've got large amount of sources feeding different kind of malicious hashes and suspicious hashes to us. The potentially the problem with this kind of intelligence, while being very valuable, by the way, that their lifespan is very short, because it's very easy for the adversary to play around these hashes, change the hashes, and generate a new hash for the same malicious code. Now, as we go towards the top of the pyramid, those vendors who are able to work on the tools and the TTPs, the tactic, techniques, and procedure part of the intelligence, potentially they would bring higher value to specific use cases, of course, assuming that the organization is at that maturity level to consume this kind of intelligence. Because with TTPs, we describe abstract information like procedures, processes, techniques that the adversaries are using, rather than solid artifacts like hashes, IPs, IOCs in general. So obviously the lifespan of these TTPs is much longer, because it's not easy for the adversaries, any adversary at least, to come up with a new technique or a new procedure to perform a certain activity like data exfiltration, for example. So understanding what kind of intel the sources we consume in our organization is very critical and very important for us to understand the value of these threat intel. Of course, speaking of which, I'll touch upon in the coming few minutes that I've still got in my segment to describe few of the services that we offer to cover these specific parts, or help our clients rather to cover these specific parts. One of these services is Kaspersky Threat Intelligence Reporting, which is a direct result of the work of our global research and analysis team. And within this report, we track those high-profile APT threat actors, state-sponsored, and the likes, and then we report on their activities, be it the motive, the technical part, the TTPs, the tools they used in their attack, potentially any zero-day vulnerabilities. And then, of course, we try to describe the mitigation strategies, how you can go about protecting yourself from such threats. Of course, the report would include a lot of technical details generally. It talks about as I said, all the TTPs, the different procedures and tools these threat actors utilize in their attack. And this information obviously would help the organization on strategic and tactical level, understanding the potential threats, understanding the new methods and the new tools used by threat actors, and then potentially prepare the organization for such attack. Now, alongside the report on operational level, we do provide the IOCs and YARA rules related to that specific attack. The indicator of compromise can be used with any IOC scanner, obviously, to scan the endpoints in the environment and make sure that they don't have any trace or evidence of being compromised. YARA rule at the same time can be used by YARA scanner to find traces and behavior of describing that specific attack or campaign. If you're more interested into getting a report that is specifically created for your environment and looking at the information the threat actors can collect about the organization, we also provide the digital footprint intelligence report. In this report, we use our vast resources to create a snapshot in time and show the client how would a well-funded adversary or what this well-funded adversary will be able to acquire about the organization without interacting with any of the organization perimeter. This potentially would help the client to understand their attack surface and then work on fixing and empowering or enforcing rather their perimeter. Now, on the machine readable side of the intelligence, threat data feeds, I'm sure many of you already consume threat data feeds in your environments. But this is a very important topic because it doesn't only provide very recent and valuable intel to the organization, but obviously it is a machine readable kind of intel. So this intel can be injected into the security controls, and then you can utilize the information and the detection they can generate with these security controls. Of course, within Kaspersky, we run a extensive exercise of data enrichment. So every single entry into our threat data feeds is enriched with a lot of contextual data that you can make use of to optimize, prioritize, and ensure that there is no false positive whatsoever delivered through the threat data feeds. Of course, we've got a lot of categories. I won't talk about them all. I would be happy to discuss with you probably your requirements or even any use case you might have in mind throughout the event. And of course, our threat data feeds, they are created in a way to integrate with a lot of security controls, be it the SIMs, the threat intel portals, or any network security control that allows or accepts external feeds. Now, one last tool I will touch upon before I wrap up is the threat lookup. And this is the window through which we provide threat hunters, incident responders, access to our threat intel database where they can look up artifacts as they identify them in their activities. So if the threat hunters trying to find out information about a specific hash or IP, URL, whatever it might be, this portal would give them all the information that we have aggregated over the past years about that specific artifact. So they can monitor the behavior of this artifact over time, as we've seen it, of course, and extract information such as the websites or URLs related to that specific hash, for example, the different domains it communicated with, downloaded from, and so on. So overall, you can create such a visualization that would link that specific artifact. In this example, I'm using a hash value with all different other artifacts that would potentially be linked with the original artifact. And this obviously would be not only valuable to incident response team, but also it can very effectively construct your threat hunting activity and draw some kind of a roadmap, if you will, for the threat hunter, how they need to go about looking and hunting for specific threats and indicators in the environment. So unfortunately, I'm very limited on time, and this is what I needed to or wanted to showcase to you today. If you have any similar requirements, if you would like to discuss any use case, I would be happy to have a chat with you, my colleagues as well. Please do stop by, and we will be happy to have that chat with you. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the World Cybersecurity Summit. Firstly, thank you so much, Mr. Hafar, for joining us and talking about the cyber threat intelligence, the what, why, and how. And, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see on the screen, we have a poll right now. The question is for the poll is, would you like a follow-up with the Kaspersky expert? So all you got to do is to answer the same. You need to participate with a special poll which is conducted. All you got to do is click on the poll button on the top of your screens to participate. So just do that right now. I'm going to be giving you a 30 seconds for the same. We'd really like your response on the same. Is the poll is right now on your screen. Would you like a follow-up with a Kaspersky expert? All you have to do is just click on the poll button on top of your screens to participate. So we'll give you another 20 seconds for that. Do let us know of whether you'd like a follow-up on the same. Would you like to have a follow-up with the Kaspersky expert? And within just the next 10 seconds is when the poll is going to be ending from our end. But then you can keep participating on this poll ongoing throughout the event. But currently we've got a few more seconds and we'd love you to participate before we move on to our next discussion. It's another 5 more seconds to go. I hope by now you all have figured out that the poll is right there on your screen. All you got to do is just participate and let us know. This is all happening at the World Cybersecurity Summit, Oman. Thank you all once again for joining us. And we're seeing a lot of responses coming in. I'm going to give you a few more seconds for this because I know a lot of you would have just joined and are trying to figure out how to participate in the poll. All you got to do is just click on the poll button. And this is the question: would you like a follow-up with a Kaspersky expert? You need to answer that with the poll. Just another few more seconds to go. 20 more seconds on the same. So the poll questions right now on your screen and stage. Would you like a follow-up with the Kaspersky expert? All you got to do is press on the poll button, which is right there on your screen. Press on that and you can participate in this poll right away. Another 10 more seconds to go, and then we'll be going ahead with some great discussions coming up. This is all happening at the World Cybersecurity Summit, Oman. Another just few more seconds happening right now. Well, thank you so much for your response. We're getting so many of you participating in this. This is going great. Thank you for that. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for participating. Thank you for your time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, after this amazing poll, it is time for moving on to our panel discussion, which is on cybersecurity framework for OT, ICS, and IoT environments. Well, we're looking at talking about developing a roadmap for the operational coordination and cyber incident, disaster prevention, and recovery planning for cyber experts. We're also looking at talking about HMI and SCADA dangers and cybersecurity strategies. We're looking at talking about cybersecurity for immersive technologies, digital transformation impact on cybersecurity, cybersecurity training for young people in the digital age. So this is going to be really interesting on how important is innovation in the field of ICT moving forward. And also we're looking at talking about the trends in digital transformation enabled by IT and OT convergence. Now remember that these are the broader topics. It could get more specific, or it could also have few other topics regarding this. So thank you once again for all the ones who've joined us today. Also, if you with the moderator, if time allows. Thank you for that. So first up for our esteemed panelists, we've got first Shafiq Kalyani, the Senior IT Manager, Oman LNG LLC, Sultanate of Oman. Shafiq of experience, information technology in oil and gas industry. He has a degree in computer engineering from the Vanderbilt University, and he's currently, as I said, working as a Senior IT Manager at Oman LNG. Thank you so much, Shafiq, for joining us today. We also have Javed Habib, Regional Head of Plant Controls and ICS Cybersecurity, NDA UAE. Javed's been working in the industrial automation after completing his engineering from City University of New York, USA. In his current role, he's somebody who's responsible for providing technical support of all their businesses in the Middle East, India, Pakistan, Turkey, and Africa in the area of industrial control systems and OT cybersecurity. Thank you so much, Javed, for joining us today. We also have Javed Dalvia, the head of ICT CC Energy Development Sultanate of Oman. Well, Mr. Dalvia, being the chief of information system security technology, telecom, and operational technology at the CC Energy Development Oman, with his business vision and a hardcore technical talent across all the ICT domains, a visionary technology leader and seasoned professional with a broad cross domain expertise in oil and gas, E&P business, enterprise wide digital transformation, and cybersecurity and risk. Thank you so much, Mr. Dalvia, for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, this entire conversation is going to be moderated by Murli Sagar Pralani, the Chief Technical Officer, National Energy Center, LLC, Sultanate of Oman. Well, Murli, a highly accomplished and a performance-driven professional with 19 years of career, reflecting strong leadership qualifications with hands-on experience in project management, process management, product management, business analysis, system study, data modeling, design of client server, and web technologies, techno commercial operations, and team management. So, thank you so much to all our eminent panelists for joining us, and thank you so much to Murli for helping us in moderating this wonderful panel. With this, I'd request our eminent panelists to please now put their video on and join us on the stage and screen so that we can take forward this panel discussion. Now, remember, we're at the World Cybersecurity Summit, Oman. Thank you once again for joining us today. Hello, everyone. How are you feeling?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Perfect. Murli, in your able hands from now to the panel discussion ends, we'd request you to take it forth with your eminent panelists. Over to you.
Thank you, Bhavna. Thank you for nominating me as a moderator, and thank you for Javed. And I'm glad that Javed Dalvi and Javed Habib and also Shafiq joining with them to be a moderator with them and to take it up to limit all our times within this to get most of the information from the experts of the world. So the woman. So thank you. And yes, let us start with the few queries what I was having discussions earlier. And I wanted to first know from Javed, what are the three key elements of the cybersecurity?
So right. So I assume you mean Javed Habib. We have two Javeds here, and with the same spelling also.
Yeah, yes, Habib.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So yes, this cybersecurity framework is way of achieving what you want to achieve. So what you put in a document for an organization when you make a framework that this is what we want to achieve in the arena of cybersecurity. So in my view, if you check on the internet, what are the key elements of a cybersecurity framework, you will get many different versions of it. Somebody will say 6 different, 5 different, 3 different. But in my view, based on the experiences and dealing with different geographical areas in my role across the many countries in the world, particularly in the industrial arena, in my view, there are three key elements that are very important for a cybersecurity framework. First of all, you should have a separate framework for your OT infrastructure and for IT infrastructure, because there are key differences in how you deal with these two different arenas when it comes to cybersecurity. So you have to have two different frameworks. One framework will, in my view, will not be very productive to have for both elements. The second element is that in my view, is your framework should be aligned with the international standards in making proper references, and it should be aligned with the regulations. So let's say if you have an organization that has branches in many different countries, so you have to have a framework that aligns with the key international standards. If you're talking about OT, then the OT standards, and making proper references to that. And then if you have to have your framework making references to all the country regulations that affect your business in different countries, and making those references. The advantage of doing that is then the international standards generally keep pace with the changes, and they tune as the requirement changes. And as you know, this is a rat race. The bad guys are trying to be more smart and trying to be more effective, to be more productive, and then therefore your strategy should change. And the first thing that changes is the standard, and then your practices change. So you should be making a reference. So standard change, you change your framework just to be aligned with the demands of the game. The third key element in my view is you should define your requirements based on the risk that you perceive. That what I'm referring to, also the country risk, the industry risk, and the process risk. So your framework should be aligned with the risk you're perceiving. So if you are in an industry, if you are in a country that is fairly subjected to hostile attacks, you are in a physical environment that poses you to many different risks around the world. And as you know now, cybersecurity is a way of warfare. So there are cybersecurity armies with the countries and regions now. So depending on where you are, you have to consider what are your threats. If you're faced with the more hostile enemies with respect to cybersecurity, your code should take that risk into account, and then the mitigation should be in that framework also. If you are in an industry like nuclear industry, power industry, which affects many people at the same time, if you are a water supply in the process industry, if you are in an industry that is key economic activity of your country, that maybe it's a refinery, then obviously the bad guys will be more prone to attack you in different ways. So that you have to take into account, your framework should take into account all those risks, make a risk assessment, and those mitigation for those risks should be part of your framework. So the three, in my view, these three elements are key elements. Without this, your framework will not be, in my view, not very effective. The first one I said, to cap up again, the segregate means you have to have the framework different for OT and IT environments. Second one is you align with the international standards and also the regulation codes for different countries and regions. The third one is your strategy should be targeted, means you do the risk assessment first and make a framework that is adequate to address all your major risks. So that's I wanted to say. I hope I've not taken too much time.
Thank you, Mr. Javed Habib. Can you also elaborate in the industry sector in Oman how it is being implemented, if you have implemented in your company of such kind of things for the cyber security, for the frameworks? Yes, you have explained how it is has to be segregated in different ways, in different measures. So, what is your experience in Oman? In globally, yes, we have a cyber threat, and also we know there are some cyber threat check websites, some organizations are checking. So how do you rate Oman for the cyber security under the industrial segment?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Murali. This is a very good question. I'm happy to answer this. So in my role, I also deal with my company has a stake in 6 power plants, in 6 critical infrastructure, utility grade power plant in Oman, and I'm also responsible for managing the cybersecurity of those power plants. Uh, we have a considerable stake in the overall Oman country's power production and overall Oman's water production. So we are key player in both sectors, and therefore our security of our assets is important for the strategic security of the for the country also. We have a framework for our corporate framework from which we follow all around the world in our assets. But also, I would like to make a very important reference here that the Oman has a cybersecurity regulation code for the critical infrastructure, which is AER. And in my view, AER is one of the best codes that have been written I have seen, and it covers it aligns to international standards, and it is particularly written for industrial sectors. So, like a two factors that I discussed are here, and it also encourages people to do the risk assessment. So yes, we manage cybersecurity of our assets in Oman with respect to the framework we have for our company internal, as well as we have a task force that works diligently to comply with the AER requirements. This is a two-pronged strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Javed Habib. I will ask another question to Mr. Javed Darbi. So, based on what is the regulatory role in the communication or authorities' role in the cybersecurity as of now?
Thank you very much, Murali. So, so different industries have different roles. So we come under oil and gas, or recently it is called MEM, Ministry of Energy and Minerals, basically. So, but overall, there's an overarching, regulation here. And things are changing fast here, especially after pandemic. So there was used to be ITA before, and then we have MEM regulations which were there in place. Now there is a CDC which is there in place. So different regulatory bodies are actually trying to make sure that the infrastructure is secure and safe. So the key thing for us here, looking at the framework or looking at this, the regulatory bodies are going to do what they are supposed to do. But it is really important, how does it impact the business? So how do you translate those things into the business? So there are key areas which we need to look at, or everybody needs to look at, are the process part of it, the people side of it, the technology side of it, and the governance side of it. So if these 3 or 4 areas are not taken care of, no matter what regulations are in place, what standards you follow, which industry you are in, you're always going to be doing a catch-up game. So important thing is you need to understand your processes and the risks which are associated with that. You need to make sure that people are ready and they are able to do whatever is supposed to be done in certain environments of any incident or anything of that sort. Then you have the technology infrastructure, which is in place, right? So that you have the right tools in place. Then the important part, which is the regulatory part, which is the governance infrastructure, which is there. You have the audits which are happening, the risk assessments which happen. And that's when these regulatory bodies and their regulation come into the picture. So I think the important aspect of this is you need to work on different fronts in order to be ready for in whichever industry you're working in. So that's my take on
that. Thank you, Mr. Javed. I also wanted to just elaborate more on the impact of the business because of cybersecurity, especially in your industry. Due to cybersecurity.
Yeah. So we are in oil and gas, upstream oil and gas. So as you can imagine, we go and dig holes on the ground, and we try to drill oil wells and try to get the oil, and then it goes into the midstream and then to downstream. So we are in the hot target for any any actors in fact, because this comes under the country's infrastructure, the core infrastructure of oil and gas, and this is the core part of economy. So yes, it has a big impact. So what people in industry are had been doing it, and what we had been doing it is look at the business impact of it, and then trickle it down to the process level and say how does it, each and every process and whatever we are putting there impacts that. So it has to be linked to the business impact. It has to be linked to your reputation, and then end of the day, you need to calculate everything into the dollar value. So if, for example, if the production is down for a day, what is your dollar value impact on that? How does it impact your cash flow? How does it impact countries, production? Because end of the day, every operator which is producing gets into the big pipe of whatever is produced by the country. So yes, it has a very big impact. So the big term which actually people need to be careful about is the resilience part of it. So anything and everything you do in your business, whether it is training people, whether it is making sure that you have the process in place, whether you are having the technology, any changes you are doing, it needs to be looked into from the risk-based approach point of view.
Thank you, Mr. And I would also ask, because this is oil and gas industry, we also know that there is separate communication channels and networks established for oil separately, and also for the in Oman especially. So they have different channels and different communication infrastructure, even for ROP and all these things, just to avoid the cybersecurity. So in that scenario, uh, in which area you will be connecting to the globe? See, basically, cybersecurity comes into where you are connecting to the globe for your IoT or SCADA systems. So, do we understand that the cyber threat is more in these areas?
Very interesting question. It all depends upon how much convergence you have done between the IT and the OT part of it. So many of the oil companies are generally do not converge a lot. They keep the IT environment separate. They keep the OT environment separate, and they keep the critical infrastructure, for example, the comms, tetra radio networks, and those kind of things separate, so that in case of if anything gets impacted, there is not cross-border impact happening. So the convergence is something which you cannot get away from. You have to go and converge basically IT and OT at one point of time. Whether it's a one-way traffic, you do it, or whichever way. Because people are sitting here far away from the oil fields. They would like to see what is happening on the well. They would like to see what is happening on the plant. So given that, the moment you start opening up airport, you are actually exposing yourself to cyber threat. So these are real threats which needs to be mitigated. Then there are air gaps you create and those kind of different methods you use. However, this conversion is the key thing. So the approach we take is, as I mentioned to you, is resilience. Business resilience is the key thing. Anything you do is risk based. You take the risk based approach for that, and every single activity, specifically when it comes to change management, needs to be evaluated from top to bottom. What is the impact on the business?
Thank you, Mr. Javed Bala. And the similar kind of gas and IT from, I would ask Mr. Safi to explain more about the transformation. Yes, now we are, yes, as you said, there is a transformation to be happen for IT and OT differences. However, Shafiq will be able to explain us more on the areas of transformation and also what is this business impacts. Shafiq, Mr. Shafiq, Mr. Shafiq, are you able to hear us? Mr. Shafiq, are you able to hear us?
Sorry, I had a network glitch. Sorry, so I didn't catch your question. Can you please repeat it again?
Okay.
Apologies.
As Javed uh, Dhalavi was explaining about what is the transformation and the limitation difference between both OT and IT, and your expert area is on same oil and gas and also into the IT segment. So can you explain, elaborate more on this IT enablement, how this is being addressed in the fields, how you are taking care of avoiding cyber activities.
Sure. Okay, it's a great pleasure to be here. And points raised earlier. Sorry, am I audible?
Yes, yes, Mr.
Apologies. So yeah, I think going back to your question, I think indeed cybersecurity now is playing huge role in overall business strategies and business plan. As mentioned earlier, it's traditionally it used to be mainly about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, but right now it has evolved beyond that, and that's actually mainly for two reasons. One is that the higher adoption of technologies, and this is not only in office domain, but this is also in the industrial domain, as mentioned just now by Mr. Javid, and the need actually to adopt such technologies in the industrial domain and the convergence. So with that, actually, the exposure became much larger. And therefore, actually, right now, cybersecurity used to be one of the corporate risks, but now it is among the top corporate risks because of the higher adoption of technologies. Moreover, as I mentioned earlier, is that cybersecurity is mainly concerned about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. But right now, what we have seen, and especially in critical infrastructure, including oil and gas, is that it's touching the safety of people because right now there have been some incidents where actually hackers were able to gain access to safety critical systems in the plant, and then which can potentially lead to huge disasters, including explosions and so on. So actually, cybersecurity is no longer only about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. It's about safety of people as well, and that this is also applicable, for example, in the industry, in the healthcare sector, where actually we have seen is that and I think this was mentioned in some of the earlier sessions, is that by gaining access to healthcare systems, it can expose people life to danger. So actually, cybersecurity is actually it's going beyond its traditional definition, and it's actually going to so many things. So higher adoption of technology has led to that. The need to adopt these technologies has led to that, and it's actually one of the major challenges for organization to move ahead with their transformation plans and technology adoptions and so on and so forth. The other thing is that the thing is that as much as you try to put protection layers on your side, whether it is a process, technology, or people. On the other side, they are also learning, and actually they are coming up with more and more things, or much more sophisticated methods, and that which actually again exposes a lot of companies to risk. So no matter how much measures, how much protection, that in my opinion, the cybersecurity being among the top security, top corporate risks will continue to be there. And therefore, nowadays, strategies and plans and business plans need to actually have that as an element or a core element of any future business plans. I hope that addresses your question.
Yes, thank you. And I would also add one more question for this. What would be the actual IoT sensors kind of thing? Sensors, we are having many sensors, many smart technologies being implemented. And what would be the IoT connectivity, cybersecurity aspects? Because this is Internet of Things, and only the devices talk to each other, and the data will be residing on the platforms. So, what is the future that you think? Because Oman is gearing up for getting new platforms, new IoT platforms, and we have some special economic zones which are becoming smart industrial cities. And what is your opinion in this to have a secured environment for these industrial areas?
Yeah, thank you. I think, when it comes to IoT, Internet of Things, specifically, again, this is one of the emerging digital technologies. Is being adopted across sectors, including, our industry. And then again, it's just like any other technologies. It is very useful. I think, it will boost the business efficiency. However, actually, it means that, higher exposure and higher cybersecurity risk. So therefore, I think, while it is important for companies and for to consider, adopting such digital technologies, IoT, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on and so forth, that needs to be carefully planned, carefully considered, in the view of the associated cybersecurity risks. I think, what we have seen, and is that a lot of companies are just rushing into adopting a lot of these technologies, and without careful consideration of the other aspects, especially, cybersecurity exposure. So it's important, and I think, it will become almost mandatory, not an optional thing going forward. However, I think, it's very, very important that we also tighten the cybersecurity aspects of introducing such technologies. And this is not only technology. I think, this was mentioned earlier, is that, you can have the best technology in the market, but there is no technology that will protect you entirely. It's not only about technology; it's about, having the right processes, having the right awareness across the organization, building the right culture. So a lot of organizations right now, they are actually treating cybersecurity like HSE, like safety. So it's a culture that you need to build in the organization. So I think, building that culture, having the right platform, having the right processes is very, very important. And with that, definitely, the journey of this, adopting more and more digital technologies will become easier. Without it, I'm just afraid that it will be quite difficult, or, challenging to continue to adopt such technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Sadiq. And I would want to add, because we still have some time, I would ask another question to Javed Habib, which is industry based, because he is into power generation and maybe in transmission area. So nowadays, we know that the entire data is becoming available in the internet for any bill payment. Systems are becoming more IoT based systems, even metering area. So, Javed Habib, can you explain what should be the industry practice to avoid any cyber threat on the metering devices in the utility?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Morali. See, by very nature, these meters that measure the either the flow of the liquids or they measure the flow of gas or measure the flow of the electrons, that is the power meters. All these meters um, are of basically in our business are of two kinds based on their application. Not based on the technology. Based on technology, there are many, but based on their application, there are two. One is the custody transfer, where the producer produces the water, gas, or or power, and then he gets paid based on that. So these are called custody transfer meters. And the other meters are for internal use. So let's say a gas turbine and the gas flows into it. This flow is also measured for many parameters that are important for the gas turbine operation. So this is process related internal measurement metering. So that's generally not connected anywhere, and therefore it is secure. The custody transfer meter by very nature are connected somewhere because these are measured, and you have to give this information to the procurement to procurer. So let's say the OPW or the procurer in Oman who buys the water and power in bulk from all these independent power and water producers has to know how much is being given into their custody. So that's why it's called custody transfer. And therefore it is connected. And then it is connected to many other systems for monitoring the efficiencies, different technical and efficiency monitoring and the business intelligence systems. So, like Mr. Javed Dalwai, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, as earlier said, it is now next to impossible to remain completely air gapped, completely disconnected from the system. So the OT systems, the operational technology now has to be connected to the IT for all the purposes I said, for business intelligence, for giving information to the remote people, and driving many other efficiency related platforms. The security, the other question I said is important, very important, because this information is critical for business and this information is critical for operation also. So all we go back to the framework. The framework that assesses this risk, like I said, the framework must be targeted. So framework for your industry should take into account that you have a metering system that is connected in so many different places, and these are the risks. And then you put your mitigation strategy in place. So you have to have different the tactics, technical tactics. I perhaps would not have time to go into all the different technologies that can make it possible for you to protect your devices. So this has your all connections have to be properly assessed and secure. There has to be different if there are computers that you have to have all the security, cybersecurity related. I'm avoiding to use a lot of technical jargons here because that would become endless. So you have to take those on risks, and then for each connection, each computer, each device, and the network associated, you have to take all the precautions into it. Proper firewalls, proper antivirus, proper network segregation, proper IPS, proper AIM, proper firewall policies. All these go into it as a solution. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Javed Habib. To share our experience, actually. So there is some information which I would share to the panel members and also to the speakers. When we implemented a new IoT communication technology, so this is to just to appreciate the procedures of Oman. So basically, till today, we don't have a Azure platform hosted here, and most of them they are avoiding to be hosted. So, and also it is not being taken Azure or any other IoT platforms. international platforms are not being procured by the government agencies or not allowed in the government agencies to get procured, Microsoft platform or Azure or any Google platforms, because they are not on premise. So this has become one of the primary criteria for regulators and security agencies in Oman to have the platforms hosted in Oman. So which is one of the primary requirement. So when we tried to implement the LoRa technology for the water meters, which we are having in Muscat, so which around 300,000 meters are going to be connected to a platform. So it has been tested by the security agencies and regulator, telecom regulator, for around 6 months with different aspects of securities and to have on-premise platform. So this is one of the initiatives that regulators is also taking, and they are also coming up for verifying such these things. And there is a stringent communication devices import mechanism in Oman, which is established. So any communication device it is being imported has to be certified by the service providers to say, yes, this device is going to connect into my communication network for IoT. So they have established a small group understanding, and this is being currently controlled by Oman now. So I think the way what isolating, however, any such kind, for example, now we have in a COVID situation. During COVID situation, it was very difficult for the telecom operators and also for the industry, IoT industry organizations to have it on premises and also to have a service from them. So earlier it used to be like they have to visit Oman to do any service. So it was highly restricted. Now the industry is planning slowly to open up and give some relaxations, however, with a very specific time-based window for a service, or doing an audit onto the customer side who is connecting, or the partner side who is connecting to the system, to audit their systems. So I would ask Javed Dalwai, what would be the idea of that? So will it work in the business in future, or it will be more expensive for the industry?
Mr. Dalway, you're on mute. Requesting you to unmute yourself.
Hello, Mr. Dalwai?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's a very interesting question. Because we are all grappling with cloud adoption, and specifically after COVID, what everybody realized that we cannot live without cloud. Cloud is a thing of now, not for the future. It's now. It's happening now. The big problem which we are facing in Oman, because the cloud adoption is slow, so all the ISPs and all the cloud providers, they are slow to come in. So, it all goes with supply versus demand. So the supply is low because the demand is low. So the demand needs to go up. Automatically, the supplies will come up. I know for a fact there are a few big companies like Oracle and SAP and some others are coming up with their own cloud in the country, for example, and probably Microsoft Azure platform will come. I know ODP is hosting Azure, but not fully. The data residency issue are the big challenges which we are facing here, and specifically in our industry, whenever it comes to critical infrastructure, whenever it comes to something oil and gas and energy sector, it's all driven by the regulation. So it becomes very challenging until we have the regulation defined very well in black and white, that what you can do and what you cannot do. In fact, last week only I had a discussion with MEM, or Ministry of Energy and Minerals, on exactly this topic of how do we actually go ahead with cloud adoption. So there are a lot of challenges, and IoT of the thing in Oman is going to take some time until they allow cloud to be made it available. And the other issue which is there, yesterday I was attending one of the webinar from Gartner, and something interesting came up. Microsoft 365, which is the platform which everybody is using it. So they talked about around 30 gochas in Microsoft 365 platform. One of the things which caught my attention is the data residency. Even though they did tell you that your data is resident in EMEA region, however, due to the disaster recovery, the data might move to another region or so other region. For example, if it's in Australia, it move to somewhere else. Or depending upon type of service you're using, okay, they might be serving it from USA, they might be serving it from. This is a huge problem which is there. So you don't have control over your data, and I fully understand why government like Oman or any other government is putting those regulations because they need to have clarity on it. The vendors themselves, they don't have clarity on it. So this is a difficult journey which everybody needs to take, and I'm not sure how easy it's going to be for cloud adoption until the regulations are a bit relaxed.
Thank you, Mr. Jawad. Abhay. And also to end up, I think we are coming to the end of this session as per the time. I would also add to this point, yes, there are many other cyber security based specifications are not being adapted till now by the regulators to be implemented in the device level. So it also has to be matured in the industry, and there is a knowledge gap which has to be filled by the external agencies to maintain to have a security based specifications into the device in itself. Thank you everyone, and also thank you Bhavna to give me this opportunity, and the stage is for you now.
Thank you so much. Firstly, what an incredible discussion that was. Once again, thank you so much, Shafiq. Thank you, Mr. Habib. Thank you, Mr. Dalmia. And thank you, Murli, for moderating this entire panel discussion on our behalf. Thank you once again to all our eminent panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we just got done with an incredible panel discussion. And on the other side, we're now going to be joined by Andrew Chev, the Director of Technology, Darktrace UK, who's going to be talking on operational integrity, safeguarding your OT systems with cyber AI. Well, Andrew, a technical expert on cybersecurity, and he's somebody who advises Darktrace's strategic customers on advanced threat defense, AI, and autonomous response. His comments on cybersecurity and the threat to critical national infrastructure have been reported in international media, including the CNBC and BBC World. Well, with this, I'd now like to call upon
Hello, and welcome to this session on operational integrity, safeguarding your OT systems with cyber AI. My name is Andrew Tsonchev. I am the Director of Technology at Darktrace. And for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about attacks on OT environments, some of the key trends and challenges that our customers face at the minute, and think about the evolution of OT attacks and how they've developed and where they might be going from here. And I'm going to use that to motivate certain ideas that we advocate in terms of defending and protecting these environments, specifically the need for using certain forms of machine learning techniques to detect and potentially respond autonomously to threats that hit OT and ICS environments. So I'm going to start by just making some comments about the attack landscape. Listed here are some of the main categories and challenges that customers in industrial verticals face at the minute. The old favorite when thinking about ICS and SCADA security has always been the sort of nation state deliberate OT targeted bespoke attacks like Stuxnet and Triton and Indestroyer. And I'll say some more about those later, but they sit at one side of the spectrum of highly bespoke, highly advanced and targeted attacks that are very challenging to detect and typically affect a small number of victim organizations. But over the last few years, a really important trend has been the comparative growth alongside that of more commodity-based attacks now being able to affect OT environments. I'm thinking primarily about ransomware, like ECANs and others, that have more and more over the last few years resulted in operational outages of production environments and cost significant financial loss to companies affected as a result. And what's enabled that primarily has been OT-IT convergence and the increased opportunity for malware to spread and manually driven attacks to move laterally from IT networks and business networks into previously more isolated and protected separate OT environments. So that's become almost as concerning a threat vector as the more traditionally focused on dedicated OT specific attacks in the environments. And there's also the threat of industrial espionage, which sometimes gets forgotten about talking about the risks to availability of control system, but confidentiality can be very important for these environments as well. And one of the other challenges is the challenges posed by the widening skill gap. And this is a really important one because it's fairly difficult these days to find suitably skilled individuals who can do IT security, let alone individuals who can do OT security, who have that convergent skill set of both a security analyst mindset and the domain expertise of understanding and working with OT systems to be able to interpret specific events and their significance that you get inside control systems. So there's room and scope there for technology to help with that problem, and I'll say a bit more about that later. But I think that kind of sets a scene for the overall attack landscape that I want to talk about. So if we focus on that selection of attacks that I mentioned, which are the high profile, often nation state, but not necessarily ICS specific attacks, where the goal is the direct and deliberate compromise of the control system, usually resulting in something like the reprogramming of PLCs and controllers. These are probably the most famous attacks of recent years listed on this in this slide. And there's some comparisons made there. And there are some things that are constant throughout these and some things that are different. So the initial infection vector can vary. Sometimes, like with Stuxnet, it's USB based. Sometimes, like with Havex, it's watering hole attacks. It could start from phishing attacks. It could start in the IT network. It could be brought directly into the OT network. So there's some variety in that. But once the attacker has a foothold, the way the attack plays out along the kill chain is relatively consistent. And it's interestingly extended or prolonged compared to IT. So you have a longer kill chain. That means that it typically takes longer for the attacker to complete the stages of reconnaissance, lateral movement, exploitation, rinse and repeat until they reach their end target. And that's because they typically have further to go. The destination systems, whether it's PLCs or like in the case of Triton safety systems, they're typically deep within the Purdue layers of a control system. So there's more burying down to be done by the malware or the attacker in the environment. And the environments are typically unique or less standardized, so that the attacker, when they land in the environment, they have comparatively more work to do in terms of reconnaissance and figuring out how to move and progress to the next steps of their environment. It's less paint by numbers. It's more a thoughtful exercise in understanding the lay of the land and decision making about how to progress in the attack and avoid detection. One thing that is relatively constant, in fact, totally constant throughout these attacks, is the use of command and control. And that's unavoidable because these attacks involve hands on keyboards. They involve operators on the other end of the connection driving the malware in these environments and making decisions about how to continue with that kill chain. And that means that they need the tether to the outside world from their implants. And it means that it's a really good way to detect these attacks because there's comparatively to IT environments less internet connectivity from OT systems. It's usually a more isolated and controlled environment. And the command and control channel is often the best way to detect the presence of something in the environment that shouldn't be there. This is a really important point because I'm going to come back to this later, of what the implications for our defensive strategy might be if attackers didn't need to rely upon command and control so heavily in the environment. The other trend I want to pull out is a one of difference between these. And you can see a column on that chart which says malware, effort, or cost. There's been a overall progression from higher to lower malware and effort and cost. And what I mean by that is that the more recent attacks are characterized more by the reuse of standard existing IT commodity malware with the addition of OT specific payloads and modules bolted onto them, rather than a from scratch, from the ground up, OT specific bespoke piece of malware. And this is important because it shows us the motivation in attacker thought processes of striving to reduce the effort and the cost and the R&D time and the development procedures to execute these attacks. And the reason why is pretty straightforward. It's that attackers are return on investment motivated, and they want as much as possible to minimize the cost and effort in executing a successful attack campaign, as that will allow them to attack more targets. So it's an important trend, which I'll come back to, but we should think about the idea that the cost involved in executing an attack is beneficial to defenders because it exerts a limiting factor on how wide the scale of the attack can be. If you can carry out an attack much more cheaply and with much less effort, then you can target many more targets and repeat your attack many times. If it's incredibly cost prohibitive to execute a successful attack, then you're forced by necessity to restrict your target to very high profile individual targets. So that's an important concept. So just summarizing what I've said there, here's some important trends. The increased use of commodity malware where possible, the continued use of command and control. And what we're going to come on to now is to talk about the trend of moving towards using machine learning or AI in malicious cyber operations. So let's think about AI attacks and what that might mean and why that might be desirable for the bad guys. So it comes off the back of the point I was just making about efficiency, lowering cost, and replication. So if you have to run an attack manually, and you have to be making decisions and hands on keyboard, and if you have to be designing custom malware before you target the environment, then that means that you are designing a tailor-made attack, both in terms of the tools and the way you execute it, for the target in question. And if you just sent generic malware out into the wild, it wouldn't be very effective at successfully compromising the very unique and bespoke OT environments that attackers want to gain access to. So AI powered attacks become relevant and important because AI allows a mechanism for automating that tailoring process. It allows for having one toolkit or one system that is generic, but is able to adapt the way that it executes depending on the environment that it's in. And we've seen the beginnings of this with polymorphic malware, but that's very simple. That's just altering the form of the malware to blend in different environments and avoid detection. But once the malware will actually dynamically adjust its execution path, and it will pick different ways of behaving in the environment, and it can replicate decision making, then you have the potential of an autonomous payload that can be deployed into environments and will seek out and execute its own kill chain inside the environment dynamically based on observations and decision making in that location, essentially replicating what humans do these days manually in the environment. And you can see how if that was possible, then suddenly the door is open to attacking hundreds of thousands, millions of targets, rather than restricting your attacks to few individual high-profile targets. So the scale can be increased massively. Another aspect is to reduce that need for command and control that I mentioned as one of the most effective ways we have today of detecting compromises in these environments. If your malware is autonomous and is decision-making for itself, you don't need the command and control. You don't have to maintain a connection to a human operator. And that means that detection is far more difficult and blending in is much easier, and remaining undetected is much more possible for the longer period of time that is characteristic of that extended kill chain in isolated OT environments that I mentioned. And the final piece here is that blending in can be done better by machine learning systems. I'm going to talk in a second about the way our technology works on the defensive side, but essentially its job is to analyze data and understand behavior. And we use that to catch bad guys, but bad guys can use the same techniques to blend in, to understand what typical behavior is, and so then hide within that in plain sight. And that's something that's very concerning, because that will increase the stealthiness of attacks significantly if attackers begin to use this. So we're very concerned about this. And before I talk about the defensive piece, I just want to illustrate these concepts a bit with a particular example of Triton and what a Triton 2.0 attack might look like if it was incorporating machine learning and AI elements in its execution. So here's a little toy diagram of that kill chain that I talked about, just to kind of give us something to talk about. So you can imagine, like most of these attacks, it begins in the top left with the compromise of an initial system. Maybe it's a phishing email, maybe it's a USB stick, maybe it came in from IT systems or from the cloud. From that point forward, you have this typical path of reconnaissance, data gathering, scanning, identifying potential targets to move laterally. You're typically moving from systems until you hit a domain controller, then you compromise a domain, then you hop to the next domain. There's often several domains nested before you get down to the PLC level, and you're trying to iterate your way down through the layers of increasing security and isolation till you get to that lower level in the Purdue model of the controllers and the industrial devices. And then at that point, typically you are trying to interact directly with PLCs and reprogram them, or alter set points, or change firmware, or whatever it is, to either disrupt the control system or pretend that everything's fine when it isn't, or something like that in the environment. So if we think about the goals that threat actors have, they have persistence, they need to remain in the environment. And we talked about that, about how machine learning enables you to blend in. Polymorphism is essentially what I mentioned before, the ability to avoid rules and signatures and detection technology by looking different. And monetization obviously is the ultimate goal, and the considerations I said earlier about reducing barriers to entry in terms of development cost directly affects monetization. So with these goals in mind, let's think about what a machine learning enabled version of Triton would look like. So Triton followed the kind of steps that I mentioned. So let's go through them quickly. So in that first stage of reconnaissance, instead of manually firing off Nmap scans and getting the results and picking targets with open ports and known vulnerabilities on them to move laterally, you can do a form of passive reconnaissance, which is far less noisy and intrusive, which is, if you have a machine learning system, you can simply watch the communication that you can see from your vantage point of other systems, and you can passively map the environment. You can understand common communication paths, dependencies, conduits, and you can model a simulated version of the environment, and you can pick an appropriate target to move to laterally that would minimize detection by staying as close as possible to what other legitimate technologies do in the environment, and maximizing the chances of success.
Good evening, Toastmasters.
By picking targets
I had attended
that look like they might be vulnerable passively from the information you've gathered. And that will mean that at that stage, you'll be able to effectively perform reconnaissance efficiently and with a far reduced detection footprint in the environment. And then when you go into accessing these systems and trying to compromise them, the way to think about this is that what a human's often doing is they are weighing up risk in their mind. They're saying, okay, if I try to compromise this system, it has a certain level of chance of success, and it'll be kind of noisy and I might get detected, versus how attractive that target is. How likely is it that that target will allow me to move further and escalate my access? What kind of a system is it? What data is likely to be on there that would help me in my goal of getting to the end target? And that's what a human operator does, but that's the sort of thing that machine learning can replicate as well. So you're doing a sort of game theory approach of optimizing choices to weigh detection against advancing your goals. And if you can't find a path that has a favorable ratio, then you can fall back on more reconnaissance. Or you could go dead entirely. So you could have malware that you send out, and if it lands in an environment where it can't effectively execute towards its end goal without detection, then that malware can just automatically switch itself off and remain dormant. And that way you can reduce the chance of detection and giving away the broader campaign that you might have if you sent it to many, many targets. And then this same principle extends to the final part of the kill chain. Once you've got your systems compromised and you have to maintain persistence, you're typically polling or checking every now and then that the system, maybe it's a PLC that you compromised, is still under your control, hasn't been reverted by some kind of normal update process in the environment. Triton fell foul of this, of tripping a redundant mechanism when it was polling for persistence. So you don't need to do that. You can instead observe other interactions, and if you see other systems talking to the PLC that you want to maintain control of, you can work out the chance, based on what you've seen, that persistence has been lost. Does it look like there's a good chance that the system has had an update based on the communications and what systems have talked to it? If there is a good chance, then and only then would you risk giving yourself away by actively interrogating the system to check if you still have control. Otherwise, there's no need to. You don't have to blindly follow a once every day schedule. Your malware can be more intelligent than that, and it can only act when necessary. So these kinds of concepts, I hope, kind of put some flesh on the bones of the idea of how machine learning and AI techniques would allow something like Triton to be a lot more effective at executing on its goals, executing its scale, and remaining undetected in the environment. So with that said, as a sort of motivation of where we're going, I want to briefly talk about the flip side of that, which is the defensive side, the good guy side, if you like. So the same principles apply. Rather than using rules and signatures and looking for previously seen attacks, what you can do instead is you can learn from the data what the typical behavior of a control system environment looks like. You can train machine learning systems to understand that behavior, model the typical patterns of life of every device and every user in the environment. And then from that, identify changes in behavior that are indicative of an attacker in the environment or attempting to get into the environment. And so once you do that without rules or signatures, you're not limited to previously seen attacks. And you can also autonomously respond. And that's really important as well, because a lot of these attacks, especially ransomware that can spread in from IT environments, can move really, really rapidly. And you want to be able to respond to them instantly, rather than waiting for a human to look at alerts, review them, investigate them, etc. And so if you understand the environment, that same knowledge can be used to contain threats as well. And finally, you need to be able to deal with that skills shortage that I mentioned. You need some kind of capacity to automatically investigate and triage and automate a lot of the work that analysts have to do when they're going through alerts to understand potential incidents. So the technology that we have for this is Darktrace. We call it immune system technology, an immune system approach. And it passively learns that concept of self for all the devices in the environment by looking at network data primarily in OT environments, build those models, and then identify those changes in behavior. And that means that it can detect not just cyber attack, but anything that causes a threat to the control system, because it's just looking for change and deviation. It also means that it works the same way in IT as in OT, which is really nice, because it's not using threat intelligence or rules, or it's not pre-configured to support a particular kind of system. It's just analyzing data from scratch to understand behavior. So it works regardless of the technology stack. And that's really important in giving organizations a unified detection layer across IT and OT to help manage the risks that come from IT-OT integration. And it also means that it's agnostic to the kinds of systems you find within a control system. And there's a very long tail of exotic and unusual and legacy systems that you find in OT environments. So being able to support all of those is really important. So the platform that we have at Darktrace that is our instantiation of those machine learning ideas is as follows. We gather data. You can see along the bottom there the different sorts of data we look at. It can be email, can be connections to cloud or SaaS environments, can be endpoint sensors, or in OT environments, it's typically network data passively gathered from the industrial network. All that goes into training those models, and then they drive our three capabilities of detect, investigate, and respond along the top. And detect is that piece that I've talked about. Investigation takes those alerts and it replicates the kinds of steps that a human analyst goes through when they are investigating an alert to understand timelines, piece together events, pivot out from the initial alert to broaden the scope and understand the full impact on the environment of the attack, and then automate a report writing process for that. And then the response piece is you've got those machine learning models, you understand behavior. If you've got a compromised system, you can contain the threat by enforcing good behavior back on it. And this means that you don't interfere with the normal essential processes of interaction that system performs regularly in the environment. You allow those to go on because you have them in your model for good behavior, but you can surgically prevent and block all the stuff that's outside that. So you can prevent the actions of the malware running on the system, but leave the legitimate software or user actions intact in the environment. So that's the Darktrace platform. And I hope that made sense in terms of the explanation of the threat landscape, where we think things are going, what's characteristic about OT attacks, and an explanation of machine learning concepts in response to that on the defensive side, and how we have gone about implementing those in the defense of OT environments for our customers. If you'd like to know more about this, or you'd like to talk about how this could fit into your environment, please do get in touch with us. We're always available to discuss specifics and talk through case studies. If you want to try the technology, we are always willing to do a no obligation 30-day free trial where you can deploy the technology in your environment and see how it operates, learning on your data and modeling your systems and detecting behavior inside your networks. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.